Hi guys, it's me, DC the Purple Diva, and welcome back to my channel, Chronicles of an Artsy Autism Mom. Before I go on with our program, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. As a matter of fact, go ahead and subscribe right now and do a double click so that you can be notified of all my video uploads. Also, if you want to follow me on other social media, on Instagram and on Snapchat, I am DC the Purple Diva. On Twitter and on Periscope, it is the Purple Diva DC. And if you're on Facebook, I have a Facebook page. It is the DC the Purple Divas Chronicles of an Artsy Autism Mom. Sorry guys, it's the end of my day and I'm trying to sneak this video in while my son is in another part of the house. Okay, so today's video is going to be about the IEP process, or the individual education program, is what IEP actually stands for. But before I start on that, I'm going to have a little drink of my tea, because it's tea time for me. And today I have my tea in my elephant coffee cup that my line sister gave me celebrating 35 years in Delta Sigma Theta. That was last year. This year, it's almost 36. So before I get into the real grit about the IEP process, I want to just briefly go over another program, which is called the 504 program, and just want to give a brief differentiation between the 504 education plan and an individual education plan. Okay, so the 504 plan is similar in some aspects to individual education plan, or IEP, with the exception that it covers individuals who may have a disability that causes them difficulty in life activities such as reading and writing and speaking, but they don't fall under the criteria that would get them an IEP. So individuals that don't fit the criteria for an IEP would go under an education plan, or 504. Both are federal programs in the United States. I don't know about in other countries, but that's how it is here in the United States. We have these two different programs for kids with disabilities. The IEP process is the one that generally children on the autism spectrum, if they've been diagnosed correctly with autism, would fall under the IEP process. And then children that don't fall under criteria that would be classified under an individual education plan fall under the education plan which is the 504 plan. So hopefully that made sense. So now I'm going to go into a brief, just a little explanation about the individual education program. And from the research that I've seen, they have it here available in the United States, and they do also have similar programs available in the UK and in Canada. So let's see. Okay, so let me just give that brief, because I've got my iPad here. The IEP, or Individual Education Program, is a document that is developed for each public school child who is eligible for special education. So that's one of the things that I wanted to emphasize. The IEP process and the 504 process that I spoke about briefly is in a public school setting. If you have a child that's in private school, I don't believe that they are covered under an IEP. But if they're in a charter public school, I think they would still have an IEP. So let me continue. The IEP is created through a team effort and reviewed periodically. In the United States, this program is known as the Individual Education Plan Program, and in Canada and the UK, an equivalent document is called the Individual Education System. So, before I go on and get into more details about the IEP process, I'm going to just give a brief go over the 7 general steps that you have to go through to get to an IEP. So I'm pulling that up in my other notes. So let me just pull that up, and we're just going to go over these I'm just going to go over these with you guys very, very briefly. All right. There it is. Okay. So as I said, there are 7 steps. The first step is the pre-referral. Step 2 is the referral step. 3 is identification. 4 is eligibility. 5 is development of the IEP. 6 is implementation. And 7 is evaluation and review. So I'm going to just give a brief of these different things. And then after I go over that, go a little deeper into the IEP process with my own personal experience with my son having an IEP when he was going through school here in the state of California. So the first step, which is the pre-referral step, this is the step that you go through basically to get referral for an IEP. If the child is under the age of 3 when the diagnosis is, then you get a pre-referral generally through the state agencies that are over the education process prior to them entering school. If they're already at school age, then that would come through the classroom setting. The next step after the pre-referral is the referral process, and generally the referral process is where you go if the pre-referral intervention was unsuccessful to get a referral for the student into special education. Okay. Once you've gotten through the referral process, the next thing is the identification. And in identification, this is doing an assessment to figure out what things are needed to help the student be successful. And a lot of times in an IEP, you have multidisciplinary teams that are involved in the process of doing the identification, because they'll identify academic things and things that'll help with our academics, such as they may need adaptive PE or behavior therapy, those kind of things to be involved also in it. So once we've gone through the identification process, then they make sure that the student is in fact eligible. And as I said, for an IEP, there are 13 learning types of disabilities or developmental disabilities that fall under IEP. Autism is one of autism, ADHD, ADD fall under the actual criteria. There are some other ones. I do believe that Down syndrome may fall on this, but I'm not sure if mental retardation does, unless it's also in conjunction with the child having autism. Once they figured out that your child is eligible for it, then there's development of an actual IEP. And one of the things that should occur in the IEP process is that the parents should be very involved in making sure that the individual education plan for their child is the right education plan for their child, and that it also incorporates things that they, as the parents, want to have in that. After it's developed, there's a meeting that is held, and then the actual IEP would be implemented, which is step 6. And after implementation of the IEP, then there will be evaluations and reviews of the IEPs. I'm not sure how the process works for this outside of the United States, but in the United States, on the IEP process, they have to do a minimum of an annual review of the process. And then there is also something that they have, at least I know here in the state of California, that every 3 years they do a triennial review to make sure that everything, that we're still on course for the things that we need for your child. So that was the 7 steps, and those are just the general steps that you would go through, and it may be different in other states, but those are pretty generally the steps that I went through. Now I'm gonna just kind of go over a little bit of what I actually went through with my son. My son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. But when he started school, we did not initially have him in public school. So he was not actually under an IEP initially. However, he did have the only part that he had under IEP was speech pathology. So he was able to have the speech therapy while he was going to the private school that we had him in. And then that was part of what we had, and we actually had to go to mediation to get that for him because he wasn't in public schools and they didn't want to pay for it. But we prevailed and he did get it, and that was something part of the IEP. Now once he did actually get into public school, we had his IEP annually. One of the things that we made sure happened when we had the IEP, at the IEP you generally will have the teacher who's in the class with your child. You're also going to have any therapists that are involved. If they have a speech therapist, if they have a behavior therapist, adaptive PE therapist, all of them would also be involved in the meeting. Generally, at least here in the state of California, you'd have a representative for special education from the actual school district that you're in. And because I'm in California where we have regional centers, and my son has a caseworker in the regional center, so his caseworker from the regional center would also come out to those meetings. Now, when we would have these meetings, my son would also be present at the meetings. He didn't actually participate probably as much in the IEP process when he was younger, but he was under an IEP until he was 22 years old. So once he was 18, he actually did sign onto the IEP. And I'm sorry guys, I know you hear that in the background. He just came into the room while I'm doing the video, but I'm almost done. So anyway, like I said before, when you're doing the education plan, it is really, really critical for you as a parent or a caregiver or guardian to be actively involved in that process, because the school district or the school, they've got a bunch of kids that are in special education. Your child is just one. You have to make sure that your child's education needs are being met in the classroom setting. So it's very important to be involved in that. What I did as part of that process is that when we had the IEP and they would have their report, I came in with my own summary that I wanted to be added to his IEP with goals that we wanted to be incorporated into the education goals or social goals that had for our son. I'll give a very good example of one that we did take care of, and that was getting past the point of him being able to tie his shoes, which can be a bit of a challenge for individuals on the autism spectrum. David? So we had that incorporated into his IEP because it had been something that he had been challenged with. And by incorporating it into his IEP, we made sure that it was something that was being worked on, not only in school, but not only at home, but also in school. So we were working on that as a team. And the individual education plan is a team effort between the parents and the teachers and the individuals who help your child. And the actual goal is to make sure that we are all on the same page in making sure that we help the child to meet their education goals, be it them graduating from high school and going on to college, or be it that they go through full and do the completion of a high school and then go into a transition program before they go into working or volunteering or whatever it may be. So I hope that I hope that this has been helpful in explaining that process. I know that the IEP process can be really, really intimidating to parents. I had a lot of additional resources because I was actually on a board at the regional center that my son was serviced through. So I got a lot of other, supports, and the information that I'm giving is the information that I learned by getting that. I also had a copy of the blue, what they call the blue book, that had the law of all my son's rights written out. It's like a big, huge book. So I hope that this has been informative. I do plan on doing a video in the future that goes over what the process is after they go through the IEP process and they're out of school, which is where I am right now. So I hope that you guys like this video, and thanks for watching, and please like and share. Peace, guys.